Shading is one of the basic way to show light and shade in any kind of paintings. It's basically like you can understand the difference between where the light is falling and because of that where the shadow is coming. So in this drawing we are going to draw a very basic sketch. It's a Rajasthani person. If you want, you can pause the video at any point, and if you want to just draw your own sketch, you can just pause the video at the final drawing and do it yourself. If you want to follow along, you can do the same as well. So right now, as you are seeing, I'm just making some very basic lines. It's very light. I'm not doing any kind of geometric work, which is like using any circle and then proportionately dividing the face or something, because it's a abstract figure. It's not something which is very realistic. So I'm just making very light strokes, figuring out where the eyes will be, where the nose is going to be, and the mustache and everything. I'm not particularly worried about how perfect the face might be. I just wish that the mustache, I would have made it a little bigger, but that's okay. Excuse me if I'm trying to adjust the camera. I'm still figuring how to record properly. So now, as you can see, I'm making the beard. For the body, it's a very basic shape. Don't worry about where the shoulders or the arms, those kind of things will be. So it's a very loose cloth that this person is wearing, so I'm just going to probably make it just be flowy kind of a shape. So in this point, I'm using a waterproof brush pen. It's an optional thing. If you don't have a brush pen, and since we are doing watercolor, you can skip the step completely and start with the watercolor. Okay, you can go to the watercolor timestamp and probably have the sketching or the outlining done in like once the watercolor is dry. The reason why I'm saying this is because if you use a sketch pen at this moment, or a marker or anything, it probably might not be water resistant, which means that after when you outline, when you apply the watercolors, there's a high chance the black color from the outlining might get into the watercolor and the painting might be destroyed. So it's a completely optional thing. You can probably skip this part. If you have a water resistant thing like a fine liner or this kind of a brush pen, then do go ahead and make the outlining. Now for the outlining part also, I'm as you can see, I'm not clearly making a very smooth line. My lines have different weights. Now what is weight, what is variations, how to give a character to the lines and everything, you can refer to the lines video that I'm going to you'll be seeing in the lines playlist. But for now, understand that lines also give a lot of character to your drawing. By making smooth lines, it might not be very much giving a lot of feel to the drawing. But if you see here, all the lines and everything, especially in the turban that the person is wearing, the lines have different weights. Some of them are thick, some of them are thin. It actually gives a lot of character to the drawing. So try to make these small things, having these small changes to the drawing makes a lot of difference. I learned this after a long while, but once I started incorporating these changes, my drawings became a little better. So once the outline is done, you can probably go ahead and erase the pencil lines. Now in this part, I'm going to add a lot of water. It's a wash technique that I'm applying over here. This is to just make the background. Okay. One thing that you have to remember, that watercolors tend to be very light once it starts to dry. So don't worry about how dark or how bright the color is coming out. Just apply the water first. Okay, right now I'm just applying plain water, plain water. There's no color added to it. Right now what I'm doing is I have taken Prussian blue and I have added a lot of water to it. And as you can see that as I'm applying the Prussian blue onto the paper, it automatically starts to seep into the paper. Seep into the paper means it starts to mix properly. Since my paper is in an incline, so again this helps a lot. If you're doing watercolor, try to keep your drawing inclined, not in a flat surface. That helps your drawing, the paints to spread properly. You can plan your drawing, start from the top, go to the bottom, and as you do that, your colors will start to move accordingly. So it's very much important. I observed that here I've added a lot of water and there's water coming off on the board as well, so I'll probably remove some of the water. But anyway, now I'll leave this drawing to dry. Once it's all dry, I'm going to leave it to dry naturally. I'm not using any blower or anything. So once it's dry, I'll start with further making the subject over there. Now what I'm doing is I have taken ochre yellow color mixed with a little bit of orange, and the first coat I'm adding very light shades. So if you see, this color is not at all dark. It might look a little dark, but no, it's not. Basically what I've added is I've done orange and ochre yellow, and I've added a decent amount of water so that it's flowy. Basically try to make your paint flowy, because what happens is it helps you cover that particular area properly. Otherwise what happens is sometimes your paint gets dry and you can see brush marks and it just doesn't look good. So right now the thing is it's really light. So to remember, mix orange and ochre yellow, make it very light, and then just add a little bit of water and cover the top. This is the first coat. The next part that I'm doing is I have taken ochre yellow color, and it is just ochre yellow, nothing else. I've added adequate amount of water to it so that it's a little flowy, and as you can see, in just one go I have finished the face. Again, note that all of these are just the first coat. If you notice, the turban is now getting dried and the color is even getting lighter. So always remember that watercolors will get dry eventually, and it will once it get dry, it's going to be really light. Okay, so I'm applying a little bit of so what I've done is I've taken a little bit of black, mixed it with plenty of water, and I had a little bit of ochre yellow, so I'm going to add that as well. So this is a very light shade of black plus ochre yellow. Okay, it's kind of gray. Once it's dry, it's going to be even lighter, but that's the thing. So for the shirt or the kurta that the person is wearing, not the jacket, just for the kurta part, I have made this color, and I'm going to do the first coat in this way. For the overcoat that this person is wearing, I have added brown plus orange, so it's giving a little bit very light brown kind of a shade. And as you can see, it's again very lightly I'm going to make. Be careful with the edges, okay? Like if your part which you have made, for example the kurta that I had made just now was wet, so a little bit on the top of his right hand you can see the colors are getting mixed up. So being a beginner in watercolor, try not to have this kind of problem. Eventually once it gets dry, obviously this problem will be fixed. But and also if your colors bleed into some other colors, don't worry about it, don't try to fix it, let it dry. Once it gets dry, eventually the color will be very light and you can fix it at that time. But anyway, on the first hand, try not to touch wet colors, try not to do immediate boundaries or something like that if the color is wet. Now I'll probably start with a little bit of shading. Now if you see, this is a very high contrast drawing. What is high contrast drawing? Basically, what happens is if you are able to see the boundary, a clear boundary between the shadow and the light, then that feels like a high contrast drawing. Then that is actually a high contrast drawing. If you see here, the color in the turban is the light part is very much clearly different than the shade part. So that's a high. If you see my hand, the shade because of the light is very smooth, right? If you notice my hand, and it's basically very smooth. So basically the light which is falling on my hand is not a high contrast one but a low contrast one. However, in this drawing that I'm doing over here, it's a high contrast drawing because the shade is clearly very distinct from the light part. We are going to explore a lot more into this in our values chapter. Values, I'm going to explain what is exactly how to make a very high contrast drawing, how to make a low contrast drawing, everything. But right now what I have done is I have taken brown color, clear brown color. So I've taken that and I have not added too much water to it, and a little bit of black, just a little bit of black to it, so that it becomes a little darker than the shade that we have previously done. So if you see, the light and shade part is clearly distinguished. We are also going to do the remaining part of the turban now. And you can immediately see right now that the first shade that we had done on the top right part of the turban has started to dry. So you can see the difference, right? That's what I was talking. The moment it gets dry, the color becomes lighter. The moment I have done the part which I did immediately, if you see, the color is a little darker. But as it is getting dry, it's getting lighter. Now I'm doing the face also. Face, you have to be very careful because there's something to do with facial anatomy. I'm not going to go further into that particular topic because it's a different thing altogether. But what I'm doing is, below the eyes, if you see that part with the cheek and all, I am adding shade to it. Since the nose is a little lifted, so the sun ray will be falling on the nose also, and that is what I've done over there. So nose part is a little elevated, and the remaining part again I have added shade. So right now, if you see immediately, the person's face has started to look very 3D because of the shade. It might be like a sunrise or a sunset scene. Anyway, so now the face is almost done. Let's do maybe we'll do the eyebrow or the eyes. For the kurta part, what I've done is I've taken plenty of black color, added a little bit of brown. Since it's grey, so this shade will be the immediate contrasting shade for it. So that's why we have done that. If you notice carefully, I have done a clear difference between the light and the shade. Okay, so you don't have to mix the shade with the light. Okay, you don't have to make it soothing. Sometimes when the light is really intense, all you have to do is just make the shape for the shadow. That's it. That's what we are doing in this drawing. Okay, we don't have to worry about making a proper smooth transition kind of a thing. For the eyes, again, I've started with adding very light shade first, because I don't want to immediately do the dark shade. See, you cannot revert the drawing. Okay, so always start with a light shade, see how it's looking, and then add a little bit darker shade. Over here, as you can see, it's just black. Okay, for the beard also, I'm not covering the entire beard. I'm just leaving a little bit of white. As you can see, it's basically giving an impression of light falling on the beard. Okay. Same thing in the front part also. Since light is falling from the right side of the person, so I'm just going to add shade to the front part and the left part. Now it's time to do the overcoat. Same thing, brown. So this time, since the overcoat is orange in color, so the same shade that we had done in the turban, I'm going to apply it over there. If you see carefully, the shadows are lining properly with the shadow in the kurta. So always do that. Don't make the shadows a little different, otherwise the painting might just look inconsistent. Okay. I find the turban being a little too light. Maybe I'll just add a little darker shade to it. So maybe that's something which is at the bottommost part. Okay, so it's not something which I'm going to cover the entire turban wherever the shadow is, but just giving an impression of the darkest shade that could be. It adds a little more value to it. Again, values I'm going to cover in another video, so do watch that as well. It's going to be in the same playlist. just some finishing touches. There is a very important lesson that I have learned is that don't overdo the drawing. Okay, so I've just added a little bit of shade to the eye because it was getting light, but I'm going to leave the drawing right now to where it is, because in watercolor or in any form of painting, we often think that if we add more and more colors, the painting will look really good, but it doesn't happen so. So what I'm essentially suggesting is just leave the drawing to a point where it almost looks good. Okay, don't make the drawing, don't put in efforts that might just make the drawing really stand out. Don't push it to that level. Okay, the moment you feel that the drawing is almost good, just leave it to there. Okay, now that my drawing is dry, it really looks very bright. Now I'm carefully removing the masking tapes. In I think in 90% of the cases I really fail in doing this task properly, but yeah, fortunately this time it's coming up decently okay. So there you go, a basic lesson on shading. Of course we are going to cover a lot more. Do like and subscribe to the channel.